Okay, here we are in Modeler 2025, and I wanted to do a kind of a focused video here on several aspects of Modeler 2025. There's multiple different workflows that Modeler can support, but we're going to do more of a character-based workflow in this particular video. I wanted to do the color menu basics, how to create polygroups. Then we're going to go into the pen tool, and we're going to adjust the topology and go through the basics of the pen tool. And then we're going to use the Topo Build menu to, basically we're going to use the brush and the smooth tools to move around the topology to get it to where we want it. And then at the end, we're just going to go dip our toe into the Sculpt Node, the new node by SideFX. And we're going to show how to use the polygroups that we created up here for masks for sculpting. So this is the sort of lay of the land in terms of the marking menus that that Modeler uses. We're going to be using a lot of the color menu, which has recently been added to the Modeler hotkey list on Alt-C. And then obviously we're going to be using the selections quite a bit, and the mirror and the build. But these are this is the layout of marking menus in Modeler. Here is the test geometry template head that SideFX gives us. Now, while this is a okay model, it's not ideal. There's some errors and some problems with this template head, and we're going to try to analyze them and then use it to do a little bit of modeling on this head. We're starting out with this because everyone has access to this test geometry template head. What I want to sort of end up with, I did a run through beforehand, and this is sort of where we want to end up. You see, we're moving the nasal labial fold around. We're doing a lot of different stuff in here. We're doing a lot more detail in the eyes, fix some of the geometry down here to be, but adding the color to the model really helps find the edge loops, and find the edge loops around the eyes, edge loops around the nasal labial fold, the lips. Helps to have these polygroups. And okay, we'll get into it. Okay, so now if we go back to our template head here, there's one thing I wanted to clear up. The C key, I have the selection menu on the C key, and that's the kind of a volatile radial menu. You can select what radial menu you want on that C key, and I put the select key on that C key, so when I hit the C, it brings up the select key, and that's the default is way up here on the tilde key, which is fine, but it's just, I think it's a little bit more in the action if it's way down here on the C key. So we have on the C key we have the selection menu, and on the Alt C is the color menu. So let's analyze what's going on with this template head. So if I hold down the control key and right click on this, it brings up the information on that node. Now these 8 primitive groups, I'm going to show you what we can do with that. So that's very interesting. All right. In the color menu, we can do groups to CDs. And what that's going to do, it's going to take all those groups that were on there. Does it? No, it just keeps them on there, but it doesn't. It changes them to a primitive CD attribute and a name attribute, evidently. I'm taking a look at these, and I'm not really super happy with what's going on with. We're going to have to adjust them. So let's start on the lips. So if I select 2 polygons going in the direction that I want to go in, then I hold down the C key, then I can select the loop, and then I can hold down Alt-C and hit Set Color. And that's going to set that color. Let's pick a more lip-like color. Okay, that's fine. Now, if I select inside here, both of these are orange, so I'll show you how to get around that. If I hit Alt-C, I can hit pick by color, and that's going to pick both of those areas, but they are separated by this poly loop here. So if I hold down the control key and hit H, it'll deselect the outside area. And then I hold Alt-C, and then I hit pick color, and then I pick that color that I just created the edge loop on. Then it'll fill that with that lip color. So that's interesting. So let's say I want to do that again. I'll select these two polygons, hit the C key, go to edge loop, and I will hit set color on that. And then I will pick this inside that edge loop and go pick by color, and it'll pick everything that's that light blue color. And then I can hold down the control key and the H key and deselect that area, then hold the control C and pick that color, and then that'll fill that area like that. Oftentimes when you're working, you want to work on just half of the model. So Alt X is the symmetry marking menu, and so if I hit clip, it'll clip in the Z-axis because I had the Z-axis selected. So I only have to deal with one side of the model because it's symmetrical. So, okay, so let's do the nasolabial fold now. Select two polygons, go to the C key, select the loop, and then Alt-C and hit set color. Now, one thing I noticed about this nasolabial fold is that it is not in the right place. Nasolabial should be coming down roughly in this area, and it should be looping back in this chin. So this is totally in the wrong spot. So we're going to have to move that around, and we're going to move that around a little later with the Topo Build tools. But we're going to continue to delineate some edge loops here. I'll just keep that for there for right now. This eye is a mess. We're going to see what this does. That's not bad. So we'll set a color on that. Just loop on that. Set a color there. So that's sort of the outer eyelid and going around the top of the eyebrow. So if I pick these two colors, so I've picked two colors and then I hit the Alt-C and go by color, then it'll pick both those colors, and then I can hold down the Control and H and deselect the colors that I don't want to have affected. And then I can pick color and add it to that. So that whole edge loop right there is one color. Oftentimes when you're working on these things, it's really good idea to have reference. So on a separate monitor, I have a kind of a pure ref board with like different topological examples. So for instance, this one is from Character Creator. So a lot of time and effort has been put into making this the correct topology. That's good to look at. You know, this one is particularly good in terms of it's more of a cartoony character, but the edge loops are the same. It's very nicely laid out with the nasolabial fold going in the right place. And so it's good to have a collection of this kind of stuff to take a look at. This is actually a pretty good one. And you get an idea of where the poles are, how the poles define the edge loops. That's kind of important to have a vision board, as if you will, of the topology that you're working on. So here's an interesting technique. So I'm going to grab that polygon, that face, hold down Shift A, click and select that, and then I can hold the right arrow to grow it just in one direction. Now I just grow it up to the middle line here, and then I can hold the Alt X down to bring up the mirror radial menu, and then hit mirror selection, and that'll select it to the other side. So that's a very handy technique to use in situations like that. Then Alt C, and then I'll set that to a different color. And then I can grab those two polygons and hold down the C key, hit loop on that, and then I'm going to set that as a color, pick that, our old technique here where we pick by color and then hold the Control H, which is, read down here, it's a flood fill, and we're flood filling by deselecting an area, and then again pick that color and then fill it with that colors. So we're getting an idea of what's happening with the edge loops on this model. Again, I hold on the Control key and the H, and I flood fill with a deselection, and then I just fill that, set that to a different color, and then I can come up here and adjust the color that is randomly picks. So now all our parts of the model are have different colors on them. They have different colors, but so the colors are a little bit harsh or a little bit too strong, and we can adjust that with the Adjust Color menu, and it drops down in an attribute Adjust Color, and then we with the color correction enabled, and so I can adjust the saturation, take the saturation down a little bit, and adjust the value, bring that up a little bit so that these are much more neutral colors. That's a little on color. So now we're going to get into the Polypen tool, and there's a couple different ways to bring up the Polypen tool. You can hit the Q key to bring up the context menu and go to Polypen, or you just hold down the Q key and flip your pen to the right, and it'll bring up the Polypen tool. And that's a much faster way to access the Polypen tool. So the Polypen tool, there's a lot of features of the Polypen tool, as you can see on the on-screen help menu here. But Polypen, as it relates to color, is quite interesting. The first thing to know about Polypen tool is you just click and drag to insert an edge on your model. Very easy. So we have a triangle here and an n-gon right here. And so I like to be able to see those n-gons and tries when I'm working on my model. And the way to do that is you bring up the display menu, which is Alt D, and turn on this vertex count menu item. What that does is it drops a visualizer here under our visualizer nodes over here, and we have a vertex count visualizer here. So to turn that on and off, you can do it through the Alt D menu item, but I find myself just turning it on, and whoops, you have to make sure it's on first and then turn it on and off just with this menu, with this button down here on the right side of the screen. So here we have a triangle and an n-gon. So to delete an edge, you just click on it and it's gone. Now, the reason why it turns off the color is because whatever is a quad is displayed as white. So this will turn on and off the color. So that's very, very handy. Okay, so getting back to the pen tool, if I hold down the Q key and move my pen to the right, just swipe to the right, it'll bring up the Polypen tool. Okay, so a couple of Polypen tool basics. Hold down the Control and Shift key will move an edge loop, and the edge loop will stop where there's a pole. So if I do that, let's say on this one, it'll move the entire edge loop. If I don't want to stop the entire edge loop, I'm going to turn on my visualizer and insert a one dot here, and just click and drag and put a dot there. So those are two n-gons. It's created n-gon, a five-sided thing. So if I click and drag on that, see, it'll stop that from continuing on. So it's these are what I call stoppers. So that's very good for controlling your edge loops. And then if you remove inline points, if the angle is not too great, then that'll remove the inline points. So that's very handy. I'm going to undo that. So if it's greater than a certain angle, then that remove inline points won't work. But it will work if you hold down the Z key and the middle mouse button and then drag to the right. It'll increase the tolerance and then pick up those points. Okay, so if I want to move just one edge around, then I hold the shift key down and that will slide that edge, just one edge. So again, the whole edge loop is control and shift, and then just one edge is shift and click and drag. To move one point around is you have to hold control and shift to move one point around, and that'll move, you have moved along the direction that you wanted to move. If I want to move one point out from the surface, then I hold the control key and the middle mouse button, and it'll move along the normal of the axis. And if I hold the Z key down, it'll do that with a soft drop off, and you can see that it automatically mirrors because I had the mirror axis on. So suddenly we have a cheekbone going on there. I'm going to undo a little of that, and if I click and drag on an edge, it'll cut an edge. What if I just wanted to move this one point? Then I hold the control key down and I can move it freely. And again, that is with a soft drop off. So I hold the Z key down and click and drag, then that will, I can increase the radius of that soft drop off. Undo that. One of my very favorite aspects of the Polypen tool is its ability to fill holes. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to clip it. So if I hold down the Q key and swipe to the right, get back into the pen tool. Let's say if I want to, like, click on a vert, and then you'll see that it's turned red because it's an n-gon. So I click on that n-gon and delete that n-gon. Okay, if I click on one of the edge verts and then click and drag into the center, it'll fill that hole with a polygon, and it's an n-gon. So then if I hold the Z key down and hover and move my pen to the right, and you don't have to click, you just hover, and it'll fill that polygon with using a polyfill algorithm to find different algorithms to fill that hole. So obviously that one's the best. Okay, so that's very handy, and that works when you're cleaning up a mesh. That is an amazing asset. Another thing that I like to do is if I insert, I hold down the shift key and just click down an edge, and it inserts a edge loop. But you see that it's flat. It doesn't interpolate between the two edges on either side. So the way to get it to interpolate is by coming in here and rebuild loop curvature. So if you hold the control and shift and middle mouse button on that, you can see, I'll do that again. I'll undo that. Hold down the control and shift and middle mouse button. It'll pop that up, and then you can hold the Z key down and click and drag and control the amount of curvature you want. So that is super handy in situations. Very fast, and then I can hold it, shift and drag, and move some of these verts around, and I just added a loop there, and it's very smooth. Okay, last thing I wanted to show about the Polypen tool is how to redirect the edge flow in order to decrease density. If I mirror this across, you'll see that there's way too much density in this area. So I want to get rid of a couple of those lines. So how do I do that? I'm going to clip it. And then on the pen tool, I'm going to click and drag over, and that will weld 2 points together. And then I can delete this edge. So that's one edge deleted. Then I can shift click on that edge in order to add another edge, and then hold down the control and shift key, move that a little bit. Then I want to move that over, and then move this one up, and I want to put a stopper there, and then I'm going to click and drag this whole edge over, and that's going to weld that entire edge. And then I can start to move these edges around, because this edge loop stops wherever it hits a red end-gon. I'm going to delete that stopper and then delete this point right here. Then I'm going to add another edge loop right there. So then I can hit the Q key and call up the brush, and then smooth it out, and you can see that creates a much nicer edge flow. So then now I'm going to just I'm going to insert a couple stoppers and start to move some edges around here. So I can start to even these out just by moving them, holding down the control and shift key and just moving them around like this. Okay, I'm done with those two. Now I want to move this up into this area a little bit more. So I'm going to put an edge stopper there. Let's see how that works out. Maybe an edge stopper here. Move this up, move this up, move this up, move this up, and move this up. And then delete those two. And then again, call up my brush and kind of smooth that out. Just going to come up here and move these around just a little bit more. So it's pretty easy to move edges around once you get the hang of it. So I am going to mirror this over. While it's not perfect, I don't want to spend a lot of time doing this, but this is before and after. Before, after. Before and after. So after, you can see that there's, it's a little bit nicer. I can still smooth this out a little bit more, and I will, but so that's how to move some topology around in order to reduce density. Okay, so now we're going to jump into Topo Build and move the topology around even more. Let me see, before we do that, we have to turn on our color, and then we've got to go way up here. And after the first transform, we want to grab that topology, and I'm going to put that on a null down here. Put the display flag on that. Now, we don't have to do this, but you could do a subdivide on that. Might be a good idea. Give you a little smoother result here. And then with that as, with the flag on that, then we come up here to Alt-W and bring up the Topo Build. So Topo mode activated to finish run tool again. So we want the main mesh on the first input and the Topo Build node on the second input. Now, a couple tools that we're going to use here. Shift W, go into the build, and then Shift 4 is the brush. Now I hold down the Shift key and click and drag on the model to increase or decrease the brush size. So, for instance, I want to move all this stuff down here. So it's so cool moving stuff around with the Topo Build tool, because it's like you'd have a hard time doing this in another tool because it sticks to the surface, and it's very very fluid in its movement. So Shift 4 is the brush, Shift 5 is smooth, and then that smooths that whole thing out. Very cool, but it sticks to the surface. That's the big thing about Topo Build, is that it sticks to the surface. I want to move this. I've always wanted to move this nasal labial fold in on this particular model. So Shift 4 and And so now we can start just to slowly tap the nasal labial fold into the right position. Also, I want this has to come up and be much closer. So I want this up in here more. So easy to move stuff around with this. It would be hard to do this with just the other modeling tools because you couldn't maintain the volume as well. So Shift 5 goes into smooth mode, and the shift increases the size of the brush. Shift 4 to go into move it around a little bit more. I don't want to get it too far because it's kind of making a little bit of a mess here. I'm not going to worry about that because it's hard to fix it in the Topo Build mode. But as soon as we get out of the Topo Build mode, then we can just smooth that out and it'll be fine. So I'm not going to worry about little inconsistencies like that in the Topo Build. All right. I don't want to do too much of this because I got to move on, but I want to get this chin in order. And we're going to flip this. I'm not worried about the left side here, screen left. I'm just concerned about the right side. If I go to the front view, hitting the space bar, I want to make sure that this is my midline, and it goes a little bit too far to the left there. So if I go into I just want it a little bit over the midline, cheat it over a little bit to the left, because when I mirror it, it's going to be correct. I like what's happening here with the nasolabial fold now, and I like what's happening up here with the brow. At this point, I'm going to come up and I'm going to get out of the Topo Build mode. Now it's going to stash all our modeling that we had done so far, which is fine. But let's come up here and mirror it. Okay, we have a little bit of an error there, but we can definitely fix that with the fix seam. Yeah. So that looks pretty good. So we fixed the seam. Okay. All right, so I have to fix a couple of our color groups here that got messed up when I was demoing that polyfill on this area. So I'll just select those, hit Alt-C, and pick color, and done. And then pick these three, and Alt-C, pick color, and done. So those are fixed. And now I'm just going to mirror that across the other side. So there, all done. Okay, I'm seeing a bunch of stretching in here, which is not good. I need to add another edge loop or two in here. I will bring up my pen tool. Just going to add one there. Move this one over a little bit. Move that one over. Put in a stopper here. I'm going to turn on. Oh, that's interesting. I see over here that I still have a little bit of a problem. I can fix that with hit 2 key. Go and make sure that I don't have any. Hit the Q menu and then do a fuse. Then hold the Z key down and increase the tolerance in it, and it's fixed. I think that's better. Okay, to finish up on the Topo Build mode, we've pretty much gone over the brush and the smooth tools, but we accessed them through the build tool. Now the slide and the split tool, we're really not going to go over this too much because I prefer to use the Polypen tool to do sliding and splitting. And the patch is a very cool new tool that Alexei introduced in the latest version, and that's going to be for another day because that's you kind of have to start from scratch with the patch tool. But we are going to look at the project tool, and that is projecting our mesh back onto a templated mesh. So you set that up by first grabbing our mesh down here, put the flag on that on our original mesh. Now it's subdivided, which is fine. And then we go into the topo mold, and so that is templated. So at this point, we hook our mesh up to the first input. Now we can go into the Polypen tool. Let's say I want to insert a mesh along here, which it could use. So if I click and drag here, and then first of all, I'm going to clip it. So here's a good idea. So this is where our templated mesh is, and you can see our mesh here. So now if I want to add an edge loop, I will go back into the Polypen mode, just add an edge loop on there, and then I'm going to space this out a little bit, space this out a little bit, so I have more resolution on my chin here, and space that out a little bit. But you notice that it doesn't quite follow the surface. So in order to get that, let's zoom in on that area and then come up here and do project. And you'll see that it projected that back to the surface. And put down another node. So that means you can work with the Polypen tool to adjust your topology and have it reprojected back onto the surface. Now, to fix this, I can come up here and call my Polypen tool again, remove inline points. Then I see, let's run this back here and just, quickly. It's not the best, but it is what it is for the time being. So then I space these out. Grab that and space that out, and then hit remove inline points. Hold down the Z key and middle mouse click and over a little bit, and then I can bring up the brush tool and smooth that out, and we are pretty much done. And then if I really wanted to get serious, I could come back up here and run the project tool just to make sure that's all back and projected. So that's how to use the project tool. And frankly, I've just started to use that, and it seems like a very, very powerful tool because it uses the power of the Polypen tool with the power of the Topo Build to it's kind of the best of both worlds. Then I think if you run the Topo Build again, then it stashes that whole thing, and you're out. And at this point, all your modeling is stashed into this node. And then, of course, we can mirror it and start to work from there. So some incredible innovations from Alexei on Topo Build Menu. All right, now we're going to move on to showing you a little bit about the Sculpt Node from SideFX and how to work with these polygroups that we created with the Sculpt Node. Okay, to get into the Sculpt Node, you hit the Q key and just go up to Sculpt Move, and that'll immediately drop a Sculpt Node over here. And then when you're in the Sculpt Node, it doesn't display the colors on your mesh, but just a neutral flat shaded model here. So we can immediately start moving stuff around, and then if we hold down the right mouse button, it brings up a pop-up menu with all our different brushes that we can use. So let's go to the inflate brush. So that is the inflate brush. Now we hold down the Control and Shift key, adjust the size of the radius of the brush. And then there's a couple other if we hold down the Shift key and use the middle mouse button, it adjusts the strength of the brush if we move it horizontally. And so that inner circle gets thicker and thinner, depends on the strength of the brush. So that's very useful feedback in terms of knowing how strong your brush is. And so that's horizontally. So moving it horizontally adjusts the strength, and you can see the strength moving over here. If you move it vertically, it adjusts the fall off so that it'll be a softer brush with the more fall off you have, and a harder brush if it's towards the edge. So if we have a no fall off and a very hard strength, then we're going to get a really strong brush with a harsh fall off. Sometimes that's useful, especially if you have it in a small brush and you want to do more detailed areas. That could be useful. Or you can increase the size, and it's kind of weird to get a little bit used to that, moving it vertically to adjust the fall off and horizontally to adjust the strength. But that'll give you a nice, so you do have a lot of control. I'm quite impressed with the control that you can get manipulating those parameters. And the fact that you can do it right in the window here is, without having to go to the parameter window, is quite nice. All right, I'm finding to adjust, if you hold the Shift key down, it goes into the smooth brush. But the smooth brush is quite strong at the default. So you have to go into the smooth brush, which is number 6, and then adjust the size of it and adjust the strength of it. And sometimes it's just crank the strength down like that. If it's, I like a very weak smooth brush, so it gives me much more control. So then if I go back into like the inflate brush and inflate some things out and then hold down the Shift key, it'll go into the smooth brush, and it'll be that a much better strength. So that's one thing to be aware of. You have to adjust the strength of the smooth brush by going into the smooth brush and adjusting it there. Of course, you have 1, 2, 3, and it gives you feedback as to what brush you're in by looking at these menus right here. Mostly what I use is the inflate and the move and the smooth. So that's 3, 4, and 6 to start off with. The pinch brush is also very cool. Now, how to use masking, because that's what we were interested in. So I'm going to delete that. So here we have these polygroups, and how do we convert these to masks? Okay, so I'm going to, again, hit the Q key, bring up the sculpt move, and it'll put me back in the sculpt mode. Now, if I hold down the right key, you can toggle mask, which only, basically it does that. And so if I go to the paint mask brush, it's actually painting a mask. Now if I hold, I want to increase the strength of that, and you can see that it's painting a mask. Hit 3 key and go to my inflate brush. You can see it inflates around that mask that I have there. So I can also invert that mask and paint on the inside. Now the interesting thing about this is it's looking for a mask attribute, but when I click on here, there's no mask attribute on here. So it's doing it internally, but it is still looking for a mask attribute. So if I undo all that and then hit clear mask, I'm going to delete this sculpt node. So we're here, it's looking for a mask attribute. So if we put a mask attribute just do an attribute create and create a mask attribute, it'll actually pick that up. And now let me show you how to do that. To make a mask attribute to function as a mask in the Sculpt node, you have to pick portions of the model we want to mask out, then hit the Alt-C key and go to by color. I think that's fine. I'm going to be masking out, I want to work on this nasolabial fold here. And so it's looking for a point selection. So the Control Shift 2 convert that primitive selection to point selection. And then just hit the Tab key and do attribute create in the viewport. And that'll drop an attribute create node in the network with the correct group on it. So then we want to change the name of the attribute to mask. And then we want to change the default attribute to 1. And it's just a float, so you only have to deal with the first set of numbers here. So that's all you have to do. And then if we come back here, hit the Q key, bring up our Sculpt Move brush. That'll get us into the Sculpt node. And then we want to use the masked attribute. And nothing will happen until you tap on the model and it updates. And you can see that there's a 100% mask on that area. And so then if we hit the 3 key to go into inflate mode, and we can start to work on that nasolabial fold. This is kind of fun. Put a 3, hit the inflate key. Okay, so we can turn off the mask, and it's a little much, but you get the idea. Okay, so the Sculpt node stashes the information in the node itself. So if I turn off this attribute create, it's not going to affect the model itself. So it's not relying on this attribute for this change in the model, which is interesting because that means we can, here's another node, an attribute paint. So we have an attribute paint node here, and so if we paint on the surface, it's painting a mask on the surface. So we can use that. We paint a mask like that. And then pump that into the sculpt, and then go back to the Sculpt node and use that attribute. It shows up on the surface. Now, if we can either sculpt inside that surface, sculpt inside that mask. I'm going to undo that, and then we can hit the L key to reverse it and sculpt outside that mask. So there's that possibility, and that has quite a lot of possibilities. I'm sculpting on a very low resolution mesh here. So if I undo this, Control Shift D, and it'll subdivide, and we'll still have our colors on it. So if we wanted to, for instance, I don't know, pick the lips, and then pick by color, and then Control Shift 2 to convert that to a point selection, and then hit a tab, attribute, create, and then we can drop down another Sculpt node, hitting the Q key, going at mask move, and then I think it overwrites that mask attribute. So if we just tap on it, so there's our, and that creates an attribute that we have to rename to mask with a default of 1. And that's going to give us that mask, our lip all masked off. And then we can, and we're at a higher subdivision level, so we can hit the 3 key. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah. Then we'll flip the mask using the L key. I want to reduce the strength of the brush way down, and increase the size of the brush. Let's turn off the mask. But these are just experiments here. And then go back to the 3 key, hold down the shift, and smooth it out a little bit. And that's not a bad looking. And then maybe increase the strength. And so we have fun with it. Okay, so let me see what we got here. So that's using this attribute create mask, giving you some possibilities here. And I think this is in really the beginning stages of this sculpt tool, and I think it's going to really evolve nicely over the next years or so. And especially when it comes to creating these masks, I think it could be very interesting. Okay, so just in conclusion, just to see where we ended up, you see we created these groups and use them to move stuff around in order to do some modeling on this face. Didn't get to where I really wanted to get. You know, I did a run through before, and this is kind of where I ended up before. A little bit. I did a lot more work on the eyes, not so much work on the mouth. So we did more work on the mouth this time. But I hope we learned some stuff. I'm going to leave some timestamps in the description to easily access what we went over in this video.